folks, my name is Jen, and today we are going to talk about all of the books that I read back in October. So I have my stack of books right here. I read 10 books over the course of October, which is pretty cool considering like how all over the place my reading has been this year so far. Yeah, I read 10 over the course of the month. Like I said, today is going to be super casual because, ooh, sorry, that noise is obnoxious, because I am painting my nails and also because I am just not in the mood, really. I'm in a very weird mood, to be honest, today. So, gonna try to keep this super cash and also try not to talk for 5 million years about everything because, like I said, there's 10 books. I don't want to talk for like an hour at you guys, especially because my previous video will have been like almost an hour long. So, data of what I read this past month. What does it look like? So I read 2 manga, 6 romance novels, 1 horror, 1 nonfiction. Yeah, that's the breakdown for the month. So of the things that I wanted to read, what did I do on banned book reading? Not so good this past month. What did I do on nonfiction? Like I said, I did manage to read 1 nonfiction book. And how did I do otherwise for like classics? Did not read any classics. And I don't think I really checked anything off of my nightstand of shame either. So those challenges, pretty terrible in October, but otherwise, like I said, I read 10 books, so that is an accomplishment. And for the most part, they were really good books. So I think what we're going to start talking about first, let's talk about all the smut first, I guess, because that's the top thing on my pile is smut. I think before I get into the physical smut that I have right next to me, we'll talk first about the audiobook that I listened to, which was I Got Abducted by Aliens and Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com by Kimberly Lemming. This was a book that I had heard about on a podcast, and I was intrigued by it. I think I mentioned the podcast recently. It's Reading Smut, and yeah, I heard about it on there, thought it sounded hilarious and exactly like some of the books that I used to read a lot when I was in like high school and college, like one of the other books that I read this month that this past month I will be talking about. But it just had like, it's spicy, but it's also not taking itself too seriously and is pretty ridiculous. And I was like, you know what, this sounds pretty great. So, as the title suggests, I got abducted by aliens and I'm trapped in a rom-com. The main character, oh my gosh, it's been a while. Let me just look up what her name is. So, Dory is the main character, and she is like working on getting her PhD in wildlife biology, and in the midst of her getting mauled to death by a lion, she is saved by these aliens. And her and the lion are both abducted by these aliens, and they both end up escaping from said aliens after waking up aboard this ship and grabbing a escape pod and basically landing on this alien planet where they encounter all kinds of creatures, some of them wildlife creatures like the lion, some of them dinosaurs. And the lion, by the way, can now talk. So Dory and her new lion friend are saved from a dinosaur attack by a mysterious and very attractive alien named Soul. and then more shenanigans happen. They also run into another alien named Locke. He is a little more dangerous, and over the course of this, Dory finds that she is like kind of attracted to both of these guys, and they are both kind of attracted to her. More shenanigans ensue. She is traveling across this world, which randomly has Earth things on it. Like there's a fucking cul-de-sac at one point. But yeah, it has random Earth things on it and Earth animals, but everything is like really bizarre and it's not like Earth at all. And she learns more about Sol and Locke and how they came to be here, how their people came to be there. There's a whole big explanation for all of that, so you're not like left in the dark or anything, so that's good. But basically, she ends up being kind of in it's a why choose book, so like in that kind of romantic scenario, which I've never read before. I do have to say, I ultimately, over the course of reading this book, I ultimately do not think that I am a why choose girly, because at the end of the day, one of the choices will always be far superior to me than the other. So that's just kind of how it goes. But I did enjoy the journey of this novel. It was incredibly funny. Like, I listened to, I think, the majority of it while I was at work, and I was having a hard time not audibly laughing while I was listening to this novel. And it is also incredibly spicy. I do have to say, like, things got pretty heated. And there are some things also that I learned over the course of this that I was like, this is a whole like subgenre thing. This is a whole trope of like stuff that happens within some of these romance novels, and I was very confused. I don't know if I don't know if I feel comfortable talking about some of them. To be completely honest, let's just say some things happen during intimacy that I did not know about. They are an animal thing, technically, but it is a tropey thing, I guess. It's something that kind of occurs in a lot of these like monster alien romances and stuff like that. I guess I didn't know about it. Now I know about it a little bit too much more than I really ever wanted to. But anyway, dang, I really enjoyed that though. I found Dory to be incredibly entertaining. The lion, who ends up being named Toto, is one of my favorite characters. He is hilarious. Sol and Locke were also both entertaining. I definitely preferred Sol overall as a character. Locke, he grew on me by the end of the novel, but I still think that Sol is 100% far superior to him, but it's fine, whatever. Very intriguing world, very, very interesting stuff going on in it, and I really wanted to learn more, which I guess is unfortunate because I don't think there is any more by Kimberly Lemming that involves this particular setting, at least at this juncture. I read some of her other books that I will also talk about in a sec, but they are all like fantasy novels, and this one, of course, is like fantastical elements, but it also got like scientific stuff going on, sci-fi. So, yeah, I really, really shockingly enjoyed it. Like, I figured that I would possibly like it based on what was said in the podcast, but I was just kind of doing it to expand my horizons overall in the smut reading, and seeing like another alien romance example, because I've read a couple of the Iceplanet Barbarians books before, so I wanted to check out something else and see what else there was out there. And also, I've never read Why Choose prior to this, so I wanted to like see what that's all about. Yeah, interesting. Spicy. There were some spicy elements to that book that I enjoyed that I did not expect to enjoy, and then there were some other elements to it that I was like, wow, no. But overall, it was surprising to me how much I did enjoy it, and it led pretty much immediately upon finishing listening to that audiobook, it led to me going online and purchasing some more Kimberly Lemming novels. And those were these three right here. The first of which, I also started listening to this as an audiobook. But I have been listening to my audiobooks online, and I ran out of minutes. So I wasn't able to finish it, and I just decided to purchase the book and read it that way. It is... Oh, I didn't tell you what the first book is. I Got Abducted by Aliens, Now I'm Trapped in a Rom-Com. I give that 4 stars. And like I said, I desperately want to know more about that world. I'm interested in learning more about the aliens that brought them there. I'm interested in learning more about overall this planet that they've all landed on, everything else. I hope she intends to write more in this particular universe of... Hi, buddy. I'm hoping that she intends to write more within that, because I really want to learn more. I mean, she pretty much did a lot of explanation and stuff, and that was good, so we could see the world more fleshed out, but I would just like to learn even more about it, and see more stories within that. So, yeah, like I said, 4 stars. Anyway, her fantasy romances. His first one is That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon. Like I said, these are all by Kimberly Lemming. This one is... When they say demon, they don't actually mean demon. They kind of use, like, you know, biblical fiery hell demon, like that kind of thing. When they use the word demon, they're kind of meaning... they're using as a catch-all phrase for monster or paranormal creature, I suppose. That's kind of what they're using it for. So this book basically follows Cinnamon. She's a spice trader. How could she be anything but with a name like Cinnamon? But anyway, Sin is a spice trader. She gets drunk at this one festival because in her world, every year, there's like a festival thrown, and then these heroes who are specifically chosen go off to this like gate to defeat demons for the sake of their goddess, pretty much. And their goddess who like protects their lands and everything. So basically, she has been at this yearly festival, having a very good time. She gets pretty drunk. She is on her way home from said festival, and she hears a noise in the woods. She goes to investigate and thinking that somebody needs help, and it is a dude needing help. So she does help him, and then immediately after helping him realizes that he is a demon. So one of these monsters from the gate who is are attacking people all the time. And over the course of a little bit more shenanigans, he reveals his name is Fallon. He is a dragon, and he has no interest at all in hurting Sin. He actually needs her help because he wants to kill this evil sorceress who has been enslaving his people for like hundreds of years at this point. So he is dragging her along for help, and over time she finds that not only does she kind of want to help him, she also finds that she is getting kind of warm for his form, and vice versa. He's pretty also warm for her form. I really enjoyed this a lot. I thought not only was it incredibly entertaining, it was also really fast-paced. I got through this book in like no time. I had such a fun time reading it. I did enjoy the audiobook while I was listening to it, and then finishing up, I also really enjoyed that as well. So much fun. I love the world that was being created here. I thought that there was one particular event that was slightly anticlimactic in it, but I did find it to be, like I said, incredibly entertaining, very funny, very spicy. I did kind of enjoy the spice level that was in this book. I do have to say the use of like spice words and stuff like that were just on the verge of being almost too corny. Like, I saw what was going on here. There's like funny little details and stuff like that. And she says things like what the ginger and like just different little colloquialisms like that, I guess, that are, yeah, like I said, just a little bit corny. But at the same time, like, this is exactly the kind of thing that I ask for a lot of the times in like fantasy and sci-fi. I don't always like stories in those genres that take themselves too seriously. This is not taking itself seriously at all. And I loved it. That is not to say, of course, that there aren't serious plot points, or there aren't big bad things that happen within this novel. There are, of course, and they are taken seriously, and but I just think that balance with the humor is also incredibly good. And like I said, the spice, pretty spicy. So yeah, I really did enjoy this. There were a couple of aspects of Fallon that I was like, I don't know if I'm really as on board with kind of the pushy nature here, but still, ultimately, I had a really good time reading this, and I gave this 4 stars. Then book 2 is The Time I Got Drunk and Yeeted a Love Potion at a Werewolf, and this is following Bree, who is a character that is introduced in book 1. She is a friend of Cinnamon, and she ends up accidentally hitting this dude with a love potion. Someone tried to give her a love potion, and she realizes it, and she chucks it away from herself and accidentally hits this dude in the back of the head. He happens to be a werewolf, who is another character who is introduced in book 1. He is like totally enamored with Bree and starts following her around and telling her that she's his life mate. She is super convinced that it is just the love potion that is making him act this way, and she's like, obviously I just need to wait like a week or so for this thing to like wear off. And he is continuing to try to convince her, no, it was the first time I laid eyes on you. It had nothing to do with the potion itself, it's just me, because I'm a werewolf and I imprint and shit like that. So they have this relationship of him trying to convince her that it's not just a potion's fault, and her being like, I'm slowly kind of starting to like you, but I also don't want to take advantage of that because a love potion hit you. That kind of thing. Shenanigans are ensuing. Remnants of plot points from the first book that are still going on as well within the story. It's not just about their sort of romance and the shenanigans involved with that, but still, this was super funny. I love a werewolf romance. I mean, I honestly am such a sucker for a vampire or a werewolf romance, because I read so many of those when I was in high school and college, especially with like the werewolf or the dog things. Like, my favorite anime when I was in high school was Inuyasha, which is about an Inugami who he is a dog demon. Or a half demon technically, because his mom was a human and his dad was a demon. But anyway, he very much into this shape-shifting kind of like that, was super into that. So was I very happy to read a werewolf romance novel? Yes, I was. I was incredibly happy, especially because, like I said, we got introduced to this character, or both of these characters. I got introduced to both of them in book one, enjoyed both of them a lot, was very happy to learn more about them in book two. I loved this. It was everything I could have hoped for in a werewolf romance novel, and it was just peak. Loved it. So fucking funny and adorable and super spicy, and I feel like this werewolf in here, like, he redeemed the last werewolf stuff that I had read previously that were just not good. He redeemed that 100% because just so good. Yeah, I loved this a lot. This is my favorite out of that trilogy. I gave this like 5 stars. And then I read The Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Human. It's about a dragon and a human, a couple of characters that had been introduced in previous novels. This is the ending of the book. I think it's the thickest one out of all of them. I had some thoughts about this one. I don't want to talk too much about this book, really, because there are things that you need to read the other 2 books to understand for this one, but still. So, again, entertaining, spicy, hilarious. I really enjoyed the protagonist of this. I think she is just so funny, very resourceful, really tough. Like, I really enjoyed her a lot. He was interesting. He was very interesting, to be completely honest. He ends up finding her trapped in a tower, kind of like Rapunzel, and saves her from said tower, but he is pretty much convinced that she is, like, his mate. But he doesn't really go about this as gentlemanly as Fallon does in, like, the first book. But this dragon's a lot older than Fallon, so I don't know if that's partially has something to do with it or what. But he is just a lot. He is very pushy and a little bit domineering. I didn't really enjoy that as much as the other male characters in this, because it's not really what I am into. However, he did grow on me by the end of the book, and eventually I was like, okay, alright, this is fine. And I will say halfway through the novel, I was like, okay, now I'm really starting to enjoy this again. And then this novel had to introduce not just one, but 2. 2 fucking things that I am scared of. And they were both in here, and I was like, God damn it, why me? So, yeah, I would... boy. But you know what? It was still a lot of fun. It was still funny. It was still spicy. Even the parts that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this particular amount of spice here. Strangely, some of it I was like, oh, interesting. I learned some things about myself while reading this book. I feel like I'm not giving good explanations for any of these, but it's just, I don't want to spoil anything for you because I think these are so worth a read. They are incredibly entertaining. I will say, if you're like super into fantasy, the genre, and you like serious fantasy and political intrigue and all that nonsense, I don't think you will like these unless you're okay with like just reading something that is really fun and like just kind of almost ridiculously silly sometimes. But I think if you like cozy fantasy, I guess, or if you, well, there's slight gore here and there and in here and stuff. But I think if you also are a fan of like fantasy that doesn't necessarily take itself seriously all the time, I think you'd like this. And it is technically, I think, under romantasy, I believe. This is called the Mead Mishaps trilogy, by the way, or at least it's a trilogy right now. I don't know if there's going to be any more in the future. I kind of hope so because I really love these characters and I love to see them again in something. This one was also a 4-star read. But yeah, I really enjoyed reading these. They were just fantastic, and now I really want to I want to read more of Kimberly Lemming's work because she's so fucking entertaining, and I really enjoyed her characters, and I really loved these worlds that she created, both the science fiction and the fantasy one, and I want to read more in those. Let's see, other smut that I read this month. I guess we can talk about You Slay Me by Katie McAllister. This is one of those series I was talking about, books that I read when I was in like high school, college, like absolutely ridiculous paranormal romances. This is one of those series. So weird, so hilarious. Katie McAllister's work in general, it is one of those where it's like she doesn't usually deal, from what I can remember of what I read of hers, it doesn't usually deal with like fantasy worlds or anything like that. It is our worlds. I guess technically what they count as maybe urban fantasy, I guess. Right? Because it's like our world, but there's fantastical elements to it, like paranormal elements to it, which is exactly the type of stuff that I was like super into reading when I was younger. Like I sucked that shit up. I loved that so much. I was reading it, I was watching it, I wanted to write in it. Like I was writing in it a little bit. I loved that stuff. So this was one of those series that I absolutely loved, and I really liked getting back into it. I don't know if I really enjoyed it as much as I remember enjoying this when I was younger, but it was still entertaining. This starts with Aisling Gray, and she is a little bit of a fuck up, I guess. She is having a really hard time. She basically gets this job as a courier for her uncle, and she goes to Paris to deliver this really creepy artifact to this woman. And it's like it's a 600-year-old golden dragon statue. And she tries to deliver to this woman and discovers her. Not only does she discover her dead, but over the course of this, she also learns that she herself is technically a guardian, which basically means she is a keeper of the gates to hell. Over the course of also finding this out, she keeps bumping into this really hot dude named Drake Virio, who she actually learns he's just showing up in human form. He is actually a dragon. What? So now the artifact that she was supposed to deliver has been stolen. She has to try to get it back. She has to deal with the fact that she is a freaking guardian of the gates of hell, apparently. And she also finds out that she is a wyvern's mate, which means the leader of the dragons, she is a mate to one of them, and guess what? She seems to be possibly mated to this Drake. So not only is she dealing with all of this and trying to figure out how to keep the French police off her back because, again, she discovered the person she was supposed to deliver the package to dead, and now they think she might be a suspect. She also tries to help in her endeavors and accidentally, sort of on purpose, conjures a demon who is like a low-level guy, but he appears in the form of a Newfoundland, but he can talk, and his name's Jim, by the way. Shenanigans abound everywhere. This was absolutely insane. Incredibly funny. That is something I will say about Katie McAllister's like novels. Like everything that she writes is super funny. The voice of the main character is like pretty hilarious and ridiculous, and I don't really know how to describe it exactly. Maybe give you some more examples. Like that genre in the early 2000s, like the genre of paranormal romances, like this, the cartoons and the cover, kind of like the Undead and Unwed series, like a little bit like that. This in the early 2000s, that specific paranormal romance genre had a very distinct voice in it. And it also kind of reminds me as a more adult Meg Cabot in a way. It's like fast talking protagonists, everything is told from their point of view. They're very sarcastic, hilarious, also pop culture references. It is bizarre. They always jump to a lot of conclusions, don't always make the best decisions, themselves deeper and deeper into bullshit fucking trouble. Eventually there is sexy times, or more than one sexy times, with said supernatural creature. Shenanigans ensue. They manage to get themselves into so much trouble, yet manage to somehow get themselves out of it again by being very, very fucking clever. Such was this book. So You Slay Me is the first book in this particular series. It's known as the Ashlyn Gray series. I had a very good time rereading this. It was funny, it was spicy, the little bit of spice that was in there. I had a vague memory of this series and a couple of points within the series, but I had forgotten pretty much everything else. So I didn't remember how the fuck anything was going to resolve within this. And I found that I really enjoyed the way it ended, the way things all kind of, yeah, the resolution to everything. And I also liked that there's a little sneak peek to book 2, which is called Fire Me Up, which I know that I also read that back in the day. But I don't know if I read beyond the first 2 books. Do want to continue on with reading this series again because it was so funny. I don't know if it's really, I don't know. There's part of it that is nostalgia for me, but it is also, like I said, incredibly entertaining. There's some things that aren't as funny anymore because some things just don't quite hold up as well. But some of it is still pretty funny. Let me see, this came out in 2004. So, yeah. I did enjoy it. There were a couple of points, I don't really want to talk about them because they're like spoilery, but there were a couple of things I was like, I don't know about that. But found this entertaining. Drake kind of reminds me, he's a dragon, but there's something about him that reminds me a little bit of like Angel from Buffy, a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, I enjoyed getting into this again, and I do want to read more of this series, and I gave this like 4 stars. Last like romance that I read was My Roommate is a Vampire. This is by Jenna Levine, and this was my disappointment of the month, actually, sadly. So this follows Cassie. Cassie is not really a fuck up, I guess. She's has not been having a good time. She's been trying to make a life as like a starving artist, and she's about to get like straight up evicted. She's having a really hard time, and she ends up finding an advertisement for this apartment in a really nice neighborhood of Chicago, and it looks really like cool. Like it might honestly be a little too good to be true. So she ends up moving into this apartment, and her roommate is a weird fucking dude. His name is Frederick J. Fitzwilliam, and he tends to only really come out at night. He's not really a morning person. He is very secretive. He dresses very old-fashioned. And he also kind of talks like he is an old man. Like he talks like he's coming out of a period drama. And he is also incredibly respectful, leaves her really sweet notes around the apartment, and is just very nice in general, but seems to have a little bit of a problem with technology. But one of these nights, she comes home and finds a whole bunch of like random bags full of blood in the refrigerator and realizes that her roommate is actually a vampire, and she kind of freaks the fuck out. But Frederick has this proposition for her. He promises he is not interested in sucking her blood. What he wants is he wants a companion because he's kind of lonely, and he also needs an interpreter for the modern day. He has recently woken up from being in like a hibernation mode for, I think it was like 100 years, or like a little over 100 years. So he has, the last time he was awake was in like the 1910s, 1920s. He has no idea about anything anymore, and he needs her help kind of fitting into society so people don't notice how out of place he is. And she needs, like I said, a place to live, a nice place to live that she can afford. So they embark on this kind of friendship with each other, and they're both also kind of very much attracted to each other. This book started out pretty okay. Wasn't sure, honestly, how I felt about Cassie. Overall, I think she's supposed to be in her 30s, but she honestly acts and talks like she's like 22. And that's just like, I can tell you as someone who is in their 30s that despite the fact that in my brain I still feel like I am 22, I know without a doubt that I do not speak the same that I did as when I was 22 for the most part. And I also know that I feel a little bit different about things than I did at that age. Like, you are ever changing as a person, and just like hopefully a 9-year-old and a 22-year-old don't speak the same or don't seem to be very similar, like maturity level wise and whatnot, I would hope that maybe there is somewhat of a difference as you get older between you and like your younger self, when maybe you were maybe not really dumb, but just a little more ignorant, perhaps. She speaks very much like she is younger than she is. I don't know what the author was trying to do with that, if the author was like trying to make her sound a little bit more artsy and flighty and stuff. I have no idea. I do have to say that Cassie, as like an artist, when it says she is an artist, she's not just like a painter or a sculptor or something. She actually does multimedia art. So she does like paintings, but then she also like chucks stuff into it. Like I've seen art like this before. It's really not for everybody. To be completely honest, I don't know if it's for me, for the most part. But I have seen people do this kind of thing, and it really describes it in here. And I will say that was a really interesting element to read about this, like an artist who is doing something that is not the typical thing when an artist is in a romance novel, that they always seem to be doing very similar stuff. I did like reading something that is a little bit more different. But I did think it was funny when she's trying to show her art and describe it to Frederick. And mind you, this is a guy who last time he was cognizant was, again, like I said, like the maybe 1920 or something like that. And he is like, what the fuck? But he is trying to be polite about it, when he's like, I don't understand what's happening. That was kind of funny. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about her. She didn't seem like she was really the age that she is supposed to be in this book. She did not seem the same. And then Frederick is like, he was interesting. He started out as like this very like polite and careful, like he's very like gentlemanly and respectful and like everything, and he seems like such a chill dude. But as soon as like sexy time is on the table, he is like trying to move in this like growly, I don't know, like your typical romance novel male love interest, very growly, very I'ma hold you down, like that kind of like dominant is what I'm going for here. And that just did not really seem to compute with his previous ways that he has acted. And that's not to say that people who are one way in their everyday life are always the same thing when it comes to being in the bedroom. That's not true, obviously. But it just his whole kind of like demeanor changed in those ways that I didn't particularly completely buy 100%. And then there is something dramatic that happens partway through the end towards and moving in towards the end of the novel that just it was so incredibly the whole thing just seemed incredibly overly dramatic, but then the resolution was so incredibly anticlimactic. And the whole setup of it was just, it didn't quite make any sense. I had to actually reread a couple of chapters because I was trying to figure out, like, what are you talking about? What is this going on? Why is this happening? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Reading this, and I'm basically, I was just reading this and I was like, I don't understand what's happening right now. And just consistently reading these lines and being like, it can't be that easy, can it? Why is it that easy? And it almost led me to wonder, why did we have this particular conflict in the book at all when it is so easily resolved, and it was not even any stakes whatsoever. Everything just seemed completely overly dramatic. I don't know, the conclusion of everything, the build up to it and the conclusion itself, without sounding incredibly fucking rude, but it almost felt like not, well, it, maybe not childish is not the right way to describe it, but it just felt like a conflict and resolution that did not feel, high stakes at all. It did not feel like it was very maturely written. Is that what I'm going for? It felt more like something that might come up on a Saturday morning cartoon, specifically for kids, and then get resolved at the end of the episode very quickly, but it ultimately was not that well written of a thing. I guess that's what I'm going for. I'm trying to not give any actual spoilers in case anyone does want to read this book, but I did not find the writing to be up to snuff for me, basically. It's what it was, which was very unfortunate because I had been kind of enjoying this novel, even though I was having my problems here and there with the characters. But when it came to that conclusion, I was very disappointed and kind of mad because I had just finished dragon romances and a werewolf romance, and I was like, man, I want to read a really good vampire romance, and this is ultimately disappointing to me. So I did give this 3 stars because it was an interesting concept. Yeah. I'm gonna quickly talk about, I think, the 2 manga that I read in the month. And those were The Girl from the Other Side, Volume 2 and Volume 3. These are both by Nagabe. I had spoken about Volume 1. These are like the omnibus, which is really cool. And, ooh, I forgot I have a leaf in there. Haha. Yeah, it's like really cool and has like really pretty, well done work. Well done, like, volumes. Very, like, I love this one. Fall and stuff. Very gorgeous. I have the last one, right there. But these are really pretty. It is following a kind of dark tale of a little girl named Shiva, and Shiva is the girl from the other side. She was abandoned outside this city, which is like a stronghold, basically, because they live in a world of people on the inside and people on the outside. People on the outside are cursed. They turn to these creatures, kind of like this guy here. His name, Shiva calls him Teacher. He has no memory of his real name, and he doesn't really have a memory of his life before he became this outsider, basically. Anyone who comes into physical contact with these outsiders also become cursed and turn into these outsiders as well, although eventually they turn into darker creatures who don't retain any memories of their past lives and are very different than how Teacher is. Teacher still is trying to maintain some of his overall humanity, which is strange because normally outsiders just don't do that in general. And he has been taking care of Shiva ever since he found her abandoned in the forest. There is a hell of a lot more to this story overall, but I feel like this is one of those where it's much better to go into it just knowing the bare minimum of the story in general. Volume 2 I had read before. I had read Volume 1 and 2 before, and I had really enjoyed them, so that was a reread. And then I received this last year for my birthday, I want to say, or Christmas, and so I read it for the first time. This had a hell of a cliffhanger. Holy shit. I will say that. Which I was like, oh my god, but I do have the final volume sitting in front of me right here, which I am planning on diving into very soon. I want to know what happens, because oh my god, the cliffhanger in this book. But this is a honestly kind of complicated story, and I'm really glad that I don't have to go into the story because a lot of shit happens. A lot of shit happens. Like, you think it's gonna be one way in this book, and then this shit goes absolute fucking bonkers bananas. There's some political shit going on, religious zealotry, and weird, creepy conspiracies, and all kinds of crazy shit that's going on in this series. There's also an OVA, which is how I found out about this, and why I ended up wanting to read these, because I really enjoy the OVA. This has so much more going on in it, obviously. Absolutely bonker series. Kind of dark fantasy, I guess, is what I would call this. Emphasis on the dark, because there's a lot about killing, death and killing, and especially people wanting to kill children and for reasons and just stuff. It's a lot. But I enjoyed both of those, and I gave both of them 4 stars. And then I read a nonfiction book called Future Boy, and that is by Michael J. Fox and Nell Fortenberry. And I currently don't have my copy with me because I lent it to my dad, because we both adore Back to the Future. And that was a hell of a good time. Future Boy basically tells the story of Michael J. Fox, in his words, basically, of that crazy time in the 80s when he was filming both Back to the Future and Family Ties. So Michael J. Fox had been on the cast of Family Ties for the previous couple of years before that, and he was, I think it was season 4 was what they were supposed to be filming at that time. He found out that he had been approached to play Marty McFly in Back to the Future, and previously that had been denied by his studio for Family Ties. However, they were desperate. Who they had playing Marty McFly currently, it was Eric Stoltz at the time, was not exactly working out for what they wanted out of Back to the Future. So finally the studio was like, alright, well, we'll put it to him and see what he wants to do. And Michael J. Fox was like, oh hell yeah. So the only stipulation to being in Back to the Future was he had to rehearse and film Family Ties during the day, and then he had to go at night and film Back to the Future. And a lot of the times he would have to be filming with just the cast and the crew, just the crew there. A lot of the cast members would be gone for some of his scenes. Others, they would be there, obviously, because he did have a lot of scenes with the people. And it was just absolutely bonkers. He said he'd be up early in the morning, he'd have to go to the studio, they'd have script writing times, meetings and stuff like that, then they do some rehearsing, blah 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 blah. He'd get put into a car at the end of the day at like 5-6 o'clock. He'd have to run over to where they were filming for Back to the Future, and then he'd be doing that until like fucking 1 in the morning, and then he'd have to go back to his apartment and crash, and then get up at like 5-6 o'clock to do it all over again, back and forth, doing all of this. It was absolutely completely bonkers time when he was doing all of this. And he said that it was really hard sometimes to be 3 people at once. He had to be Family Ties, he had to be Back to the Future, and then he had to try to be himself in between all of that. And he had such a crazy time doing all of this, but he said it was ultimately so rewarding, and I learned a lot of things. Like, I'd already known some background information just because I love these movies so much, and also because I had read earlier this year the book The Visual History, so I learned more about like the writing and behind the scenes information. But it was so awesome to get like this personal insight into what was going on with him too, and kind of really see how crazy his life was and learn a little bit more about exactly what he did. Like, I knew that he had played the guitar in the scenes in Back to the Future. I knew he played the guitar. He'd worked with a musician to basically hone his skills for the Johnny B. Good scene and everything. I knew that, but I didn't know that he already knew how to play the guitar, and he was in a band already with a couple of the writers from Family Ties. I didn't know that he'd been playing guitar since he was like a teenager. I didn't know any of that. So him working with the musician was really to get everything down like perfectly and whatnot, but he already kind of knew how to do that. And I knew that he'd done some of the skateboarding. I didn't realize how much of the skateboarding that he had done on set, and I didn't realize that he already knew how to do that, and he was very much into skateboarding anyway. And I just learned all of this really cool information, inside jokes, different things, his interactions with everybody, getting to be friends with people. He had very kind words for people, even when they were absolutely bizarre, kind of like Crispin Glover. Well, I'm sure if you're a fan of the movies, you have heard about how fucking weird Crispin Glover is. So, he even was just very careful and kind about how he kind of worded not so great interactions and things going on set with him either. And finally talking to meeting Eric Stoltz and talking to him about everything years later, and just, it was just really great. It was very great insight into the movie and like that time period of his life. Very cool to learn more information about his life in general. I knew that he'd written one other book that I've been meaning to read. I didn't know that he'd written like a couple of other books, so obviously all of them are now on my TBR. I was very happy to see some stuff about him and Christopher Lloyd getting to know each other and becoming friends and stuff like that. That made my heart happy. But yeah, overall I really enjoyed it a lot. I really enjoyed reading it. It was so much fun. I know that, like, obviously Nell Fortenberry also did a lot of the writing as well, but like, I don't know, it was just nice to hear in his own words Michael J. Fox's experience and everything. And yeah, I just really loved it, and it made this little fangirl's heart very happy. So I gave that, like, I know I usually don't rate nonfiction, but I did rate this one. I gave it like 5 stars. And the last book that I read, the last one that I'm going to talk about, was a horror novel. How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This book, I don't know what I expected from this book exactly, but what I got was entirely not what I was fucking expecting at all over the course of reading this. Reading this book, you know that Louise has just lost her parents. They have died in a car accident. She is going through a tough time. She is basically sort of, a single mother-ish to her 5-year-old daughter. Her ex is a pain in the ass. She doesn't want to have to leave her grieving 5-year-old daughter, who is grieving her grandparents, to go back to the Carolinas to go for the funeral and like deal with her parents' home with her estranged brother Mark. But she's going to have to. So she has a pretty successful life. Her brother has been like the fucking loser, kind of the siblings. He is constantly going through jobs. Was definitely kind of seemed like the golden child with her mom, especially, which Louise has a lot of like resentment built up about that. Mark resents her for being so fucking successful, and just there's a lot of mutual sibling resentment that they're working through, and the loss of their parents like so suddenly is also something that they're dealing with. They're dealing with the will, they're dealing with the funeral, and they're dealing with their parents' home, which looks a little bit creepier than it used to be. Suddenly the attic door is fucking nailed shut, and their parents' house is still chock full of creepy ass dolls and a bunch of puppets. Their mother used puppets in Christian ministry. She had like a very specific Christian puppet ministry that she would do, because this is the South. She had all of this, so their house is chock full of all of these puppets, and it seems like she's made pretty much all of them. Like, she'd been obsessed with puppets ever since she was a little girl, and she had this one puppet that both of the kids pretty much really don't like. His name is Pupkin, and he is a fucking creepy. And I am saying this as someone who actually loves puppets and usually does not find them creepy. The house, chock full of them. So full of them, and also full of all of these really creepy dolls that seem to watch you, and also some taxidermy. There's this one part with some taxidermy squirrels that gave me the fucking ick, let me tell you. There is a lot going on in this house, because it seems like there is some weird shit going on with the way that their parents seem to run from this house before they ultimately got in the car wreck and died. They were running from something. And not only that, there seems to be an unsettling aura and weird shit that is happening in this house. And the two of them also are having to come to terms with some stuff that happened in their childhood that they've been kind of trying to block out ultimately from their heads because of how ultimately fucking traumatizing it is. This is about a family that does not deal with their grief well. This is about a family that does not talk about death and does not really properly handle their emotions. This is a family full of secrets. This book was fucked up, let me tell you. Like I said, I didn't know what I was expecting exactly. I read the first chapter of this book, and then I see this first section here, denial, and I was like, oh, now I'm in for it. I was expecting, I don't know what I thought I was expecting, dealing with some creepy ghosts or something within this house, and I knew from what people had said that there were puppets involved, but I didn't really know what to expect. I, like I said, read that first chapter and saw this, and I was like, denial? What the hell does that mean? And I see there's these other black spaces here. So I flipped, not for any spoilers, but just to see, and I see anger. I see bargaining. Oh, depression. What? Acceptance. Oh, it is the stages of grief. It is the 5 stages of grief, breaking up the sections of this book. And that was when I really 100% knew that I was fucking in for it with this thing. Wow, you guys, this is my first Grady Hendrix, and I have to say 2 things. One, I understand now why people go fucking bonkers for this dude's writing. And the second thing I can say is I also totally understand why people don't fucking like this dude's writing. There were some sections of this that were incredibly hard to read, and is for also a couple of reasons. One being, first of all, being that there are some very descriptive, gory parts in here, and I personally don't always do so well with the gore. So those were really hard to read. Yeah. And the other part that could be a bit much was the characters themselves. I found that I didn't really like any of the characters in this book. I actually found problems with all of them. I wasn't particularly fond of their extended family. I didn't particularly like Louise. I didn't really like Mark. I really didn't even like Louise's daughter. I found that 5-year-old to be annoying as fucking hell. Her ex was a shithead. Like, I didn't like anyone in this book. Their deceased parents, wasn't particularly fond of them at all. Their mom, fucking cuckoo bananas. Their dad, such an enabler. Damn. Like, I was not a fan of anyone in this book. Which should be shocking to you when I say that I read this damn thing. Because I'm sure if you've been around here a while, you have probably heard me say that I DNF something because I didn't give a shit about any of the characters because they were all terrible people. I made it through this book. And not only did I make it through this book, I think this book might be a contender for one of my best reads of the year. Because this blew my fucking mind. This freaked me out. And not in like a creepy way. Like, I actually, legitimately, I wasn't scared. I wasn't like ultimately like scared to read this at nighttime. I wasn't like ultimately like scared of any particular thing. I still love puppets so much, and I find them so cool, and I am not afraid of them at all. I will say ventriloquist dummies can go suck a fuck because, I mean, I was one of those youths traumatized by Slappy, so not having that. But puppets in general, no, I'm chill with them. They're cool, we can party, it's fine, I love them. That wasn't what got me. The very real horrors in here, like I said, the gory bits were what was more that horrified me. And like I said, there is one part with taxidermy squirrels. That was the part that got me. That was the part that actually freaked me out a lot. The other sections of this, I was just like, oh wow, what? Things got batshit bonkers crazy at some point within here, and I still don't know how I feel about part of that ending because of how crazy it got. It got weird, but I still really enjoyed it. I found this so entertaining, so grotesque in some ways, and damn, let me tell you though, the way that this was written about a family who can't fucking deal with grief in a healthy way. Whoa, that was the part that really truly horrified me the most. And I think that's also what I really loved about this book, ultimately, was because it wasn't just that it's like a horror book. It had so much more going on other than trying to scare the pants off you. It reminded me of The Shining in that way, that there are other stuff going on. There are people coming into this that are dealing with their own demons, and they have to deal with a fucking scary ass haunted house. Like, it was so good. I do have to say, Mark has a whole section in here where he is telling the story and trying to make Louise understand where he is coming from with some weird shit that just happened in their parents' house. And that was a bit bonkers to read. Like, totally out of left field, totally crazy, didn't understand where the fuck is this coming from, what. That was kind of crazy. And I guess that particular section, and like another really weird thing that happens towards the climax of the book, I can totally understand why some people roll their eyes at Grady Hendrix. It was weird. Like I said, batshit crazy. But I still really enjoyed this. I really, really had such a fun time reading this. I had such an interesting take on puppets, on the art of puppetry, on family dynamics and grief and the things that we don't talk about, secrets, it was so fucking intense, and I really loved it. And I knew it was a good time when the last chapter like made me cry. So yeah, I loved this. And I didn't give it 5 stars because there were a couple of parts of it that I was just like, what the fuck. But I did give this 4 stars, and wow, yeah, I did really enjoy it, and I am gonna have to read more of his books in the future because wow, it is a roller coaster ride. So yeah, guys, that was everything that I read in the month of October. Mostly a spooky smut month, I guess, rather than ultimately spooky ooky month. But what I did read, I really enjoyed. For the most part, I only had, I think, one disappointing read. Everything else was like great or exceeded my expectations. So yeah, overall, not too shabby. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books. Let me know if there's anything you recommend based on these books. And thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for always watching. If you're new here and would like to subscribe, please indeed do so, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.